1969. It was the summer of love, the summer of murder with the LaBianca family and Charles Manson. It was Men on the Moon. And it was a weird time. I mean, for those of us that lived through the 60s and were there to actually experience it, they weren't the greatest of times. They were wild and chaotic. There's a sexual revolution going on, which made it fun. But there was also a war in Vietnam. I'm trying to figure out who I am as a person, where I'm going to go as an artist and as a musician. And I'm up in San Francisco trying to gear up to play with somebody up there. It's not happening. Hear Uncle Meat, which is one of Frank's double albums that they did. Lowell was on it. I go, that's the band I want to play with. So I had a phony calling card, which allowed me to make phone calls from a phone booth. And I had two labels I could call. One was Straight and the other was Bizarre. They were both Frank Zappa labels. Well, I chose Bizarre and called that. And they go, who? What? Frank's going over to Europe. I must have called this lady 5-10 times and just each time sort of made a little bit more of a dent as to, look, I know this is unusual. I'm not really sure how to get started here. I need your help. And she did just that. She eventually introduced me to Lowell. Lowell and I met. I kind of equated to the first time the Castro and Che Guevara met. I heard that they got together and it was like they talked about everything under the sun and just went on for hours and days. That's the way it was with Lowell and I. I got to his house 4 or 5 hours early, by the way, and the door was open. There was a really beautiful young blonde sitting on the floor listening to Eric Satie and reading a book. She goes, oh, come on in. Lowell will be back in about 4 or 5 hours. He said to expect you. So come on in, make yourself at home. It was a street up in, not too far from where the LaBianca family was murdered, actually, which happened about 3 months later. A rustic house in amidst other homes that were somewhat rustic, but off the beaten path a little bit. And Lowell had a samurai sword hanging up on his wall, a sitar he had studied with Rabbi Shankar was in the corner. There's a bookcase with Hal, with Last Exit to Brooklyn, which was a horrific book. Of all sorts of debauchery. He had some albums, Lenny Bruce. There's a song that we later did on Waiting for Columbus, Join the Band. Hey now, join the band, Big Bull Rack gonna join the band. That was off of a Smithsonian album. All this stuff is in there, so I'm looking at all of his books and everything. By the time Lowell showed up, I had a pretty good clue of who he might be. Very eclectic individual. Connections between things, that kind of person. I knew we would hit it off, and we did. But when I came back down, he did have a piano, definitely. It was his mother's piano, a little small spinet, kind of a blonde spinet, I guess. And we trashed that piano, taking it to gigs and doing all kinds of stuff. But that's where we sat down. We wrote Truck Stop Girl and Strawberry Flats. And we do these sort of biographical sketches of Texas. He had that song Willin'. I was like, wow, that's pretty neat. And we actually, Greg, to be honest with you, we wrote a whole series of things. One of them was called 10,000 Whips. And it was a 15-minute instrumental which turned into a song called Dance of the Nubile Virgin Slaves. Well, some of the guys coming into the house were like Elliot Ingber, who was one of the guitar players with the Mothers of Invention, Help, I'm a Rock, Ray Collins, Jackson Brown would come by, Fred Tackett, who's in our band now, Martin Kibbe, who helped Lowell write Dixie Chicken. There was a slew of people I met that first year. But the first amount of music that we came up with, we took to Ahmet Ertegun over at Atlantic. And Ahmet heard it, And I had no idea that this guy had produced Lowell, Ray Charles and all these wonderful, just, he was the guy. He's listening to this stuff that is just awful. He goes, boys, it's too diverse. So we go, okay, all right, Ahmet, we'll go back to the drawing room. So now we come up with Brides of Jesus, as I said, Strawberry Flats, Gunboat Willie, Truck Stop Girl, all these songs that appeared on the very first Little Feat record, which are about as diverse and eclectic as one can get. So you can only imagine how eclectic we were to begin with. Well, Richie Hayward was in a group called the Fraternity of Man, of which Elliot Ingberg, who I just mentioned from the Mothers of Invention, had moved from the Mothers to that group. They were in a movie with Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson and Easy Rider, in other words, Dennis Hopper. And there were several bands that had music in there. Well, they had Don't Bogart That Joint in that movie, which is the first time I'd ever heard it. So they were going in to record what would be their second album. And Lowell goes, well, we want you to play on this record. I go, well, what does that have to do with Little Feat? He goes, well, once they make that record, they're going to split up. I said, so we're going to make a record, they're going to split up, and we're going to start Little Feat. He goes, yeah. I go, okay, I get it. Welcome to Hollywood. So it was real. I'm just talking about very chaotic times, very chaotic way of assembling thoughts and music. But I jumped right into it. My first session beyond that was with a group called the GTOs, Girls Together Outrageously. And one of them, I don't remember the girl, there's Cynthia Plastercaster, and they used to literally take plaster cast of these guys' things, and they didn't do it to me, but we had a wonderful time examining the prospects of it. And this was just the way it was back then. People would make love as opposed to shaking hands, they jump into bed with each other. So it was that kind of era. And in the midst of all this, I'm sleeping in Lowell's car because I'm allergic to cats. He's now going to marry his neighbor's ex-wife because they had an affair and something, as these things happen. And as I said, the LaBianca family, unfortunately, were murdered, which was a real tragedy. The beach that I had been sleeping on up in Isla Vista, which is next to Santa Barbara, a month after I got off the beach, there was a guy up there with an axe killing people that were sleeping on the beach. Chaotic times. Vietnam War, chaotic times. I thought the government was lying to us. Who knew? Oh, yeah, they were. Well, we're right back to square one, some 30, 40 years later. I mean, nothing's changed.